I'm Josh Legler, consultant to the NEMSIS Technical Assistance Center. This is our task force call for EMS interoperability. And so Clay and I are joining this call from the IHE Connectathon that's happening right now in Austin, Texas. And we've got a few people with us here in the room, and then a bunch of you online. Just keep in mind a couple of housekeeping things. One, the meeting is being recorded, so keep that in mind. Two, we're using my computer to run both the presentation here in the room and the Zoom connection. It might be a little hard for those of us in the room here to monitor the chat. So we really encourage just unmuting and speaking today, more so than using the chat. That would be helpful for those of us here in the room. Okay, so let's get started with what we're going to be talking about today. Let me get a couple things out of my way here. All right, so today's topic that we're going to dive into is the governmental, regulatory, and contractual environment for exchanging data with the rest of healthcare. Just to put that in context, we had our meeting in February where we talked about identifying the data exchange partners and establishing relationships. We talked about the networks that are available nationally as well as local or state level HIEs. So today, the governmental, regulatory, and contractual environment, we're going to talk about what some of those agreements look like that you might sign with a network. Then we in our upcoming ones, we start to get more technical. We'll get into the healthcare data standards that are available for interoperability, actually diving into data elements being parsed and extracted and shared, APIs, sequence of workflow, things like that. But today's that focus on this overall environment for agreements and regulatory environment. So this is what we're hoping to get out of today's call for all of you to understand the federal government environment for EMS interoperability, where we play in there, to understand the eHealth exchange data use and reciprocal support agreement, or DURSA, the Carequality Connected Agreement. Coming up as a new thing, we have the Trusted Exchange Framework and Common Agreement, or TEFCA. And we would also welcome, those of you on the call to share the experiences you've had in the past or recently with the regulatory environment and the contractual experiences. I've heard from state EMS data managers who have told me horror stories of how it took 2 years to get an agreement developed with some other entity to share data with EMS, things like that. And so we want to hear about those. So the questions that we want to try to answer today, is there anything in federal regulation that promotes EMS interoperability? Is there anything that is a barrier to EMS interoperability? Is there anything in the common agreements with these national networks that could be hard for EMS or its vendors to commit to or adhere to? And what are the best solutions for streamlining that process of satisfying regulatory requirements, getting agreements in place with interoperability partners so we can move forward? So we have a variety of people that we've invited to share some perspectives with us. In just a second, I'm going to turn off my slideshow so that we can all see each other's video a little bit better. And I'll switch things around for us here in the room. So give me a second to do that. But we are going to start with the Office of the National Coordinator for Health IT. Rachel Abbey is on the line with us. Next, we're going to hear from Eric Heflin from the eHealth exchange perspective. We also have people, I think they'll be back in the room, from the HIMSS Government Relations group. We would like to hear about TEFCA. And of course, we will hear from the EMS software vendors, people representing HIEs, state EMS offices. We want all of your input. But we're going to start there with ONC and eHealth Exchange as our first two, setting the stage here. So Rachel, give me just a second to switch things around on our screen, and then we'll turn the time to you. Rachel, we've asked Rachel Abbey to kind of outline ONC's perspective with EMS interoperability. And give me just a minute here. Okay, so we now have most of you up. on our screen. Let me switch things around on our view a little bit here. Okay. So Rachel, are you there with us?
Yes. Josh, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. Thank you.
Great. Can I share my screen? Would that be possible?
Yeah, Carolyn, could you give her permission to share screen?
Yes,
While she's bringing that up, one of the questions that we're really interested in is like, where does ONC see things going in the future for EMS interoperability? So great, we'll get that screen share up and turn it to you. Thank you.
Great. Thank you all so much. I don't know if I will be able to share my screen. For some reason it's not, not showing the right one. Hold on.
Okay. If I need to, I can try to
it.
change permission. Okay.
Got it.
Great.
I see it. Okay. Can you all see it? Yeah. Great.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So I did want to say that, you know, this slide kind of outlines like what we are seeing and what we're kind of like we're moving from towards, I guess, as it relates to healthcare in general. And you all are included, EMS is included, of course. And so, you know, you all remember in 2009, we had this huge influx of funding specifically for adoption and use of EHR systems. And then the development of ONC's certification program, along with, you know, the formerly called, you know, meaningful use program, and so forth, in our certification program and how they use together. And so today we're kind of moving towards what 21st Century Cures Act has asked us to do. And that came into fruition in 2016. I know, can you believe it? It's already like 2023 and then like we're just doing stuff for 2016. Talk about bureaucracy. So anyway, so there are three key things that we're in charge of, ONC, the Office of the National Coordinator for Health IT, that, you know, I see as really helping to benefit you all in regards to information sharing. So one is information blocking. So this prohibits, you know, technology developers and, you know, providers, as well as health information networks from interfering with access, exchange, and use of electronic health information. So this is key because EMS is specifically called out in the providers as well as hospitals. So I really see this as a mechanism to really help benefit exchange between the two entities. The second thing is around standards. So that's data and API standards, you know, for access without special effort. So at the end of last year, through certified health technology, all EHR vendors and others that fall under our certification program are required to use API standards to allow access to electronic health information. So that's something also that helps benefit you all in regards to gaining and accessing data. And then lastly is TEFCA, which is the Trusted Exchange Framework and Common Agreement. So this is the network of connectivity, right? So it's helping to build those pathways between all of the different networks in hopes that like you all could join a network and then begin sharing data across that shared infrastructure. So I think it's really critical. It's like partnering with your health information exchanges. It's partnering with your vendors. It's partnering with others in your community to really think about what is the best way and the you know, easiest way for EMS in my community to onboard and begin to share information. Now, TEFCA is still, you know, fairly new. We just announced like the prospective QHINs over the next for the next year. So hopefully they're going to be working over the next, several months to begin connecting and beginning sharing information between QHIN to QHIN. So that's where that is. And I hope, Josh, that answered the question that you were asking. And it looks
Thanks.
like John has a question. So John, I'm going to let you go ahead.
All right, have lunch a little bit. Yeah, so my question for you is with regard to the data blocking. It's still really an issue out in the healthcare community as so I'm from Image Trend, right? We're an EMS vendor, probably the largest one in the country. And we're still running into that as just a pain point as we're dealing with hospitals and the hospital systems. My question would be, this has been put out there, right? And even this 2016, and here we are in 2023, and we're still having the problem. What else can ONC do to ensure that our entire healthcare ecosystem understands that EMS is a part of it? And they need to be sharing that information because it is extremely valuable.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, we're putting the pieces into place. I think, we definitely at ONC see, healthcare as a continuum of care, and you all are a part of it, along with, other folks in behavioral health, long-term care, folks that have not been traditionally at the table, public health. And so we're doing our best and what's within our authority to begin, pushing that out and encouraging the sharing of information across all of these systems. I as it pertains to information blocking, I can say that there's not one size fits all. I mean, there are several exclusions that people can take. But, we do have a formal process in which you can, provide, information to us if you think that there is a case of information blocking. We really want to encourage as much as possible, sharing the sharing of information. And I'll put that link in the chat where you can find more information about that. I hope that answers your question.
My follow-up question is, what information can ONC provide that we can leverage in those discussions that we're having?
Right.
There's a couple things that have been done by NEMSIS, even with some lawyers and whatnot, but it's if there's more mass communication or anything that ONC can do to kind of reinforce the fact that this is taking off, right? We're going to be doing more asking for this information.
Right. No, I mean, that's a fair question. And I think, we continue to iterate that, the EMS is a part of the healthcare continuum. I mean, just the fact that, you all are considered providers in the information blocking, rule, that's important. I think that that's a step forward. And so I think, we're doing the best we can to kind of get that information out into the community. We speak at various places. We're happy to come talk, various venues. Eric Cheney and myself have been working for years around this. And, we hope we're working together to pull together an EMS and health information data summit version 2 or 2.0, if you want to say, hopefully for the fall. And so, I think that'll be a prime opportunity for, hospitals and EHR vendors, as well as you all, the EMS vendors in that community, can come together and kind of learn from each other and kind of see how you've been able to overcome some of the barriers in places where exchange is working.
Yeah, if you could give us some information on that, Rachel, that'd be fabulous.
Yeah. As soon as we establish the dates and times, we're still working on the logistics, but you all are on our list, I promise.
Absolutely. Awesome. Thank you.
And Rachel, I think that ONC has kind of a fact sheet on data blocking. Is that right?
Yes, we have a lot of tools on information blocking, and I'm happy. I will try and put those in the chat as well. There's actually and I'll also pull that document that specifically calls out EMS as a provider as well in the chat.
Great, thank you. And we'll get that out through the task force email group too. I did notice there's some meeting chat stuff. I didn't see who put the chat message in, but if you're able to unmute and kind of share your voice with us, that'd be a little easier for us in the room. No, okay, maybe not. Great, thank you, Rachel, for that overview from the federal perspective. If anyone has further questions, actually, I should ask before we move on. Anyone online who has additional questions that they'd like to ask of Rachel? Okay. What I'd like to do now is turn next to Eric Heflin to talk about eHealth Exchange and specifically about that data use support agreement. Did I get support right?
Right.
Yeah, support. Okay.
Yeah. The second part of the DNA is the support portion of it. So
yeah. So you can actually stand anywhere. It's a 360 camera.
Okay.
But close to the mic is probably great. And I'll let you introduce yourself.
All right, great. Well, thank you, Joshua. Is everybody able to hear me okay and perhaps see me as well?
Your hands
Yes.
cut off.
Okay?
You sound good.
That's probably a good thing. I aim for that in my photographs, actually. So, okay, how's the audio and video now?
Thumbs up.
Oh, you're
Great.
good.
Sounds good. Well, thank you, Joshua and everybody for inviting us to briefly just kind of chat. Those questions that we happen to both be here in Austin in person. So I'm Eric Heflin. I'm actually currently a consultant for the eHealth Exchange. I actually had the honor of being the co-founder, really employee number 2 at the eHealth Exchange when we took it over from the ONC. Originally, eHealth Exchange was an ONC federal project. And they approached us back in, I think, about March of, I think it's 2012. And asked if we'd be interested in taking it private. And so we said, yes, we see a huge amount of value. Fast forward, a lot of work, a lot of volunteers, a lot of standards bodies, a lot of people actually in the room here and next door, the Connected Fund. It's really grown tremendously. We remain a nonprofit. We're here for the public good. We're actually the oldest and largest health information exchange in the country, at least to my knowledge. We have directly connected over 75% of all hospitals in the United States. And we're connected to 30 other networks. And so we basically are approaching, well, if you add all the numbers together of everybody that says they're connected with all those other 30 networks, we're approaching about 110% coverage. So I think it's probably, I'd question the numbers a little bit, but we're close to 100% coverage in the United States in terms of hospitals, labs, pharmacies, clinics, dialysis centers. And anyway, my goal talking today is really to focus a little bit on the legal agreement. The DURSA is actually, the name is very deliberate because when we really originally envisioned the eHealth Exchange, one of our visions was we weren't creating just a vendor-led network of organizations trying to profit off of healthcare. We actually were trying to create a community. And that's really what I think we've done. And so the data use and reciprocal support agreement is actually part of the eHealth Exchange's culture, which is we encourage organizations that if they're having trouble exchanging with a peer, we encourage them to work together collaboratively. And that includes competitors or co-opetition. And in fact, I think that's probably one of the most valuable roles the eHealth Exchange plays in this process is we're a vendor neutral, technology neutral convener. And so in the event, two organizations are in good faith working together, but they're having trouble, we will provide, facilitation services to help get them, connected live up and running. So as far as the legal agreement, I'm actually a techie. I'm not a lawyer, but one of my standing jokes is that I have to, it pains me to say that I think one back in the ONC days was actually not our technology, but our legal agreement. To my knowledge, at that time, it was one of the world's first scalable healthcare agreements. And by scalable, you have to think back, 15 years ago, which is when this all started. Whenever you wanted to transact data with another partner across the street, across the country, you had to get lawyers involved and negotiate a point-to-point agreement. And we realized that, technology scalability can be done, is important, but if we don't have legal scalability, then it's going to fail. And so the DURSA went through multiple rounds of federal agency review, which is a far from trivial process. It went through state agency review, private sector review, nonprofit review, for-profit vendor review, and so on. And ultimately, after a lot of time and actual cash expense, we have the DURSA legal agreement. And the way it works is, let's say, for example, your group of organizations were to connect the health exchange. The agreement you sign is actually not with the health exchange, the legal, nonprofit. It's actually a multi-party agreement you're signing with your peers. So all of the other organizations on the health exchange network have signed this exact same word-for-word agreement. And so it's non-negotiable. That's kind of actually expedites things in most cases, because you just kind of hand it to legal counsel and say, thumbs up or thumbs down. There's no redlining as an option. So it really goes through pretty darn quickly once they realize that, this is take or leave it. And it has to be, because we can't recontract with, 400 other organizations, right? The health exchange, one way I look at it too, is that agreement on the legal side and the technical side is one connection to the entire United States. Through one connection between, a given participant in the exchange, talk to the exchange hub.
The audio is breaking up a little bit.
Over 2 billion transactions a month. Okay. Is this a hard case?
Is this a hard one? No, it's our internet connection. It's our hotel internet connection.
Okay.
Are we sounding better now? I might be able to switch to a hotspot, but are we okay now?
A little better. It's a little mumbled, but I could just hear you now, Josh.
Okay, great. What's the last thing you heard clearly?
Oh,
Sure.
about, I would say it was mumbled for about 20 seconds, if that helps.
Okay, so the exchange network has a hub that transacts about 2 billion messages a month, usually under about 1 second each. But more importantly, on the legal side, that single DURSA legal agreement also allows connectivity through all other health exchange members, plus the 30 other networks as well too. So signing one agreement with the exchange plus some addendums basically gives you connectivity for 30 networks through one technical connection and essentially one legal agreement. Well, anyway, I talked to our CEO, Jay Nakashima, about what you all are trying to do. He was very excited about it. He specifically wanted me to let you know if you're interested in talking further. He has his full support behind this effort. And we'd like to have maybe Jay come in and talk with you all. Our council, if that'd be helpful to you, to help facilitate, any questions you may have. Also, just on a personal note, I actually reached out to your organization about 6 or 7 years ago, I believe. And it was when your latest standard was, I think, just being adopted, and I said, let's work together. And they said, we just finished NEMSIS. We're going to go with that, and then we'll talk to you later. So fast forward, here we are talking. So anyway, ambulance is one of my passions. I'm in charge in Texas of the disaster response system here called HA Texas Pulse as well, one of the other hats I wear. And so, what we can do to help patients in challenging circumstances and the providers helping them, I'd love to help you all accomplish that. So anyway, happy to talk with you further, and thank you for inviting us. Happy to take any questions. Otherwise, I'll sit back down.
We have a few questions from the chat.
Okay.
Carolyn, stable again on audio the last couple of minutes. I'm trying to decide if we should connect to a hotspot instead, but we might drop if we do that.
So just, we can hear you clear now. So I'll let you know if it gets mumbled again or shaky.
Thanks.
So a few questions. I'm not seeing them.
Yeah, Carolyn, So we'll read them off for us.
That looks like it's not to me.
Could you restate your name and the affiliation? Sorry, I didn't get it.
Sure. Yeah, I'd be glad to. I'll put it in chat as well.
Okay.
It's Eric Heflin, and I'm co-founder, and now I'm the consultant for the Health Exchange, as well as do work for HA Texas. So, and I'll give Josh has contact information in case there's a reason to follow up, David. So, I think we have. So
Wonderful. Thank you. So,
any other questions?
yeah, this question is from Anne Voss-Brink, and she wrote, I think it's national law, but perhaps it's only Arizona, but a huge barrier to HIE participation is the opt-in system requirement instead of an opt-out. So EMS agencies have to find a way to get patients to opt in, and they are not comfortable taking on that liability if they don't get all of their I's dotted and T's crossed and somehow opt someone in without permission.
Yeah, so we've addressed that pretty extensively, Exchange, and I have a strong personal opinion. Opt-in, that it ain't going to work. Period. Let's move on. It's not going to work. We have example after example worldwide and within the United States. Opt-in will fail 100% of the time, without exception. Anyway, that's my personal opinion. We actually have worked with a few states. We work with federal agencies. The VA, up until a few years ago, had opt-in, 100% opt-in. I believe the rate of opt-in success was around like 13%. It was 2% at one point as well, forever. And that included multiple years of continuous soliciting their patients, that, the veterans that have served us, to opt in. My opinion, personally, not speaking for them, they failed. So they worked with Congress. Congress changed the law, and now all veterans are opted in automatically. If your state law requires that, my suggestion respectfully would be, and we've done that here in Texas, is work with your legislature to get that change to something that's going to work. Otherwise, plan on failure. That's my personal opinion.
Okay, thank you. And we have another question on here from Anne Voss-Brink. So this isn't from an agency standpoint, which isn't from an agency standpoint, is not having a standard for hospital EMR data point transmissions. So our hospitals don't need consumable data points. And as far as sending EMRs to the EHI EMR vendors, and hospitals don't have the motivation to make this work or inoperable.
So can address hospital motivations. We've actually tried several programs here in Texas that did have hospital participation requirements, and they were challenging. I mean, hospitals have a lot of audits, a lot of competing priorities. Certainly would come to them with an unbudgeted project and say, can you schedule this into your already overflowing backlog? My recommendation is perhaps release some funding associated with this too, because that puts in a hospital person. That's why I would observe.
I think the other thing that's important here, though, is if, let's say, an EMS vendor has signed up as a participant in eHealth Exchange, well, then they have access to the network. And if an EMS agency responding on a call needs patient history, or if they want to request the discharge summary from a hospital, it's already there, right?
Right, exactly.
No additional work for the hospital.
Well, on the query side, work by which, for example, the rig with the driver and the crew that has a mobile device, indeed, they could actually, and Pulse, the demonstration I gave yesterday, I'd be happy to give to you all as well too. On their phone, they can actually query and get the patient's problems, meds, allergies, social, family, a great deal of information like that on their phone or tablet. Pushing the hospital, the Health Exchange does have push transactions. But that's harder. It has to do it as well. The good thing, if they're on the Health Exchange network, that means they already have connectivity, they have a legal agreement in place. And so now it's a matter of working with the hospital to actually enable a new connection. Also related to standards, all the Health Exchange connections that go back and forth are based on industry, non-proprietary standards. And so push is used today, for example, Public Health and Health Exchange to send data about reportable conditions from hospitals to the Exchange, to the Association of Public Health Laboratories. So there is a precedent for push across the Exchange as well too. And I think maybe something like that could work on fire for your ambulance, drivers and your rigs out there in the field. So they treat a patient, they document what they've done, hit a button, and uses FHIR to go to the exchange. The exchange pushes in the hospital system. So again, that's harder. I don't want to oversell the hospitals. They have to be willing to accept that. The good thing, the connectivity exists for them to do so, and it's based on standards.
Wonderful, thank you. And then Josh, this question is for you. Where and when will the recorded for the meetings be posted?
I don't have the answer for that yet.
Okay.
We'll figure that out.
So David, we will let you know when we have the answer to that.
Eric, could you also talk about who would actually sign the eHealth Exchange DURSA? Is it going to be the,
Sure.
We have 20 or so EMS software vendors. Are the 20 of them going to sign on, or?
Right. So yeah, I'm not an attorney, but I've talked to a lot of them over time. So please judge my comments appropriately. So the participants to the DURSA are usually the data holders, the data consumers. So typically it would not be a vendor organization. It would be the vendor's customers, like the hospitals, the health systems, and so on that sign the DURSA. Just like on the other side, for example, the signatures are federal agencies or state agencies or health information health networks or organizations like Kaiser. I forgot to make too is if you look at federal law, again, me as a techie, opt-in is not required by federal law. And already there for treatment and operations, no opt-in is required. So this sounds like a state barrier or policy barrier. So again, I'd work from that angle how to resolve that issue.
So Eric, can you say that again? I don't know that I really got a good answer on how would an EMS vendor like this trend
Connect.
with.
Yes. So do you, for example, do you host data for your hospitals you work with and your rigs, or do you, like, for example, sell or provide your software to the hospital or the ambulance service, and then they deploy it and then use it?
Yep. They pretty much deploy it.
Okay, so in that case,
So in the image trends case, it's software as a service, so web-based.
oh, yes, so it's like,
So they,
okay, yes,
their data center has the data.
And
Well,
part of what I'm thinking about there, if we think about the treatment query,
Yeah.
it's our EMS agent in the field, but they're accessing that software through
right.
us.
Yeah, well,
And to
typically-
get that information. So how do we get access to it so we can get it to them?
So typically it'd be an agreement signed by your customers, it sounds like. There have been a couple of exceptions though, like here in Texas. The vendor for HIE Texas is a third-party vendor, AI/PCC. They've signed the LEO agreement. They have a technical gateway, and then HIE Texas leverages that signature. So perhaps something similar could work for you as well. In this case, if that scenario would work, you would sign the DURSA, but you would then flow down everything to the hospitals and the ambulance services that actually are your customers.
Well, they're doing value add to the data too, though.
Okay, so probably both.
They're decomposing the documents into their.
Yeah, so we do have help
I think they would
information
be.
exchanges.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we would be consuming.
Yeah, you would be the organization, you would be doing it on behalf of.
Yeah,
So I think that on behalf of relationship is happening somewhere, but they really are the ones requesting the data.
yeah. The other option too is I understand there's some type of a NTSB, backing for this as well too. And that may be another option is perhaps the NTSB. We're very federal agency focused. We're connected to the Department of Defense, Veterans Health Affairs, SSA, and others. And so another option might be to work, the NTSB angle, have them perhaps sign the agreement, and then everybody else flows underneath that. But again, I'm the techie. There's a reason for that. I probably just said everything wrong. But I think there's several options to explore, and probably the general counsel, the exchange would be, or outside counsel could talk with you and figure things out.
Yeah, I think that's a great question to explore further because.
Or the CEO, Jay Nakashima.
Okay, yeah, because, we have EMS agencies who go on 50 calls a year, 1 call a week.
Yeah.
Right, and so the question, are they ever going to be the signatory to the agreement or not? It's a hard question.
Well,
The vendors are
Yeah.
handling millions of records.
Yeah, well, the eHealth exchange, we want to recognize that again, to the extent I represent them, that there are different scenarios. And this is obviously such an
The audio is breaking up again.
opportunity. I think we would do anything we can to find a way to make it work for you all. for the legal and between NEMSIS and Fire on the fly. Because the hub has one connection and that technology can do data translations. So one option might be to translate between Fire and NEMSIS. I don't know. I've looked at the NEMSIS standard. I think it's at least, got some possibilities. You use, CPTs and ICD-9s or ICD-10s. So there's some commonality. Okay, well, I'll let others.
Okay, we're
Thank
going to
you.
pause for a second and switch over to Wi-Fi hotspot. So give us just a second here. We might come back.
All right. Thank you all for having us.
Thank you very much, Eric.
I'll be around for the rest of the day. I'll talk to you all some more. Let's go to the call.
Okay, we're going to try. Okay, can you still hear us?
Yes, we can hear you.
Wow, that was pretty seamless. Cool.
Yeah, I feel like this might be better.
I think so, yeah.
And we had one more question in the chat. Isn't Health Exchange connected to and accessible to Carequality participants?
Yes, it is. The Health Exchange is connected to Carequality, including all the live Carequality 30 or so networks, and that's live in production today. Also, it was announced, I think, 2 weeks ago. The Health Exchange is one of the 6 initial round of QTF QHIN. I believe the formal term is applicants. So that we'll be connected to the QTF Qualified Technical Framework and TEFCA and so on as well. Right, and we're connected to Commonwealth production as well today. So again, when I think about it, it's one legal and one technical connection to the rest of the country. And we can translate for you guys too, like between NEMSIS and Fire, perhaps. Okay, well, again, love to talk with you all further. And again, Jay Nakashima, our executive director, would love to also chat with you further as well too. And you can talk to the legal side of the company.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks again, Eric.
All right. Thank you.
Carolyn, any questions we need to catch up with online?
Not that I see. I think they're all answered.
Okay, wonderful. Wanted to mention TEFCA, the Trusted Exchange Framework and Common Agreement. I don't know, Amit, if we have anyone in the room who might, I can definitely cover a little.
So one of our GR folks wasn't able to make it, so we don't have them here today.
Okay, no problem. So the Trusted Exchange Framework and Common Agreement is an ONC sponsored effort to provide kind of an umbrella over health information networks. And this is the latest thing going on right now. So these things are not in production yet. But the TEFCA agreement, if you read it, it has stuff that's like verbatim the same as the eHealth exchange agreement. So you can tell where the kind of the genealogy of that agreement came from. And then TEFCA adds a few other things. I think, if I'm not getting this wrong, that TEFCA does a much better job of explaining how data might be used for public health in these networks. Well, that's important. We have state EMS offices who are involved in NEMSIS data. But the agreements are very similar overall, so it's interesting to see. Anyway, the idea here is, instead of these point-to-point agreements with hospitals, the hospital has already signed on to a network. We just got to get the EMS agency or the vendor, we got to figure out who is the signer, right? And sign on to the same network instead of negotiating these point-to-point agreements. So TEFCA is going to take that and it's going to recognize QHINs, Qualified Health Information Networks. eHealth Exchange is one of the networks that has applied to be a QHIN. No2 is an entity that we recognize in EMS. They've applied to be a QHIN. And several others, and there will be more in the future, that'll all be under this common agreement. So then, even if you go, whether you go to eHealth Exchange or to No2 to get connectivity, you're actually signing the same agreement, the TEFCA agreement. So that's the goal there with that. But we have to work with what's available today as well, with the agreements that are currently in place. Good news being that those agreements look very similar. So I want to open things up. We'll probably take another 20 minutes or so here, just to open up for conversation, especially those of you who are online with us. Again, thanks, Carolyn, for monitoring the chat, but we would love also to just have you unmute and we'll hear from you. a couple things as we go back to those questions that I posed at the beginning. Does this information help you understand the regulatory environment and how EMS might actually get signed in to connect to these networks? And what barriers are you seeing that we need to work on as a group to address and solve? So I'll open it up with that.
I'll speak up here because I have had to deal with this a lot in this past year. And part of what I've been trying to figure out and having discussions is like barriers to adoption, right? We think about like operations query and things like that. As we're starting to engage with these hospitals and entities, we've got to sign an NDA, we got to get a BAA, they want to do security audits, we got to do an EPHI agreement, and that's just to get started, right? And that's doing discovery, and then finally now we're talking and getting things moving and stuff, but it takes so much time and back and forth and the redlining and stuff. So the talking about an agreement that is like, it is what it is, you can't redline it, is extremely appealing, as part of TEFCA and everything. And I think what's going on there is great. But at the same time, all of these different agreements, because you're interacting, it's between Imagetrend and a hospital, or Imagetrend and an EMS agency. All these individual agreements end up taking up so much time before we can actually start doing anything and really connecting people and get their value out there. Yeah, and that's what this tries to solve.
Joshua, this is John Donnelly. I don't know whether you guys can hear me.
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Okay. So some of you know me, some do not, but I've been involved with the interoperability space in the country for some time. I was one of the initial co-chairs of the patient care coordination domain of IHE. And we had been in this space looking at EMS connectivity to the ED for a number of rounds now. I'm very happy to see this resurging here. But I did want to mention just about this TEFCA thing, because I'm involved a little bit there with the establishment of the QHINs and things. One of the value adds I see is that besides the QHIN, there are things that are called flow down requirements, right? So an entity like an EMS entity or a hospital that is now what is called a participant or a sub-participant of that QHIN has obligations to support the use cases that have been defined and are supported by TEFCA. And I think that might be a path into some of this legal challenges that you're having, because if they do participate, then as a participant of a QHIN, you will reap some benefits there legally, right? Because there's then a QHIN participant agreement that has to be executed. And in that, it has the requirements of things that are covered by PHI protection, various monitoring of the network, assurances of conformance to the PHI and all HIPAA requirements and stuff. So there might be some real benefit there, and it's not done yet. I mean, the agreements are done, but the actual designation of the QHINs and their what they call their designated network inside of the QHIN world, you might hear that term designated network. That is the suite of entities that a QHIN brings to the table as underlying participants to work with them. So I for one, have high hopes that that's going to help some of this for some of the organizations like the EMS entities around that have been challenged with not only, they seem to be recognized as a provider of data. Hospitals are very happy to receive data, but to send it to them, it's always been the challenge. At least this is what I've seen, and probably many of you on the call share that same experience. And I think if you really want to be a part of the provider ecosystem, it has to be a two-way street. And I did have one question for those that have been involved in it. Has it been mostly operational or organizational challenges, or are there still data related things that are outstanding in terms of matching data in the EHR to data that the EMS vendors desire. Is that still an outstanding item?
Yeah, I'd say both of those are. Any from the EMS side that would like to comment on those?
Well, this is Mario Sanchez from Zoll. We're a device and software provider and software for EMS. Yeah, I think it's a little of both. Part of what we've seen is just the adoption of some of the standards that have been defined for EMS across EHRs and hospitals. I know that over a decade ago, some of us on this call were involved in defining the CDA standard for NEMSIS, and it didn't really get universal adoption. I think, quite frankly, part of that is because HL7 body is really looking more for a global standard than something that might be US centric. But whatever the case might be, there wasn't global adoption. So I think which standard individual health systems may actually use and be able to do something with for EMS data has been one challenge. And the other is certainly the patient match. And I don't know that for anybody it's much of an issue with the data that's captured that is supported by an application as much as the nature of EMS, right? You're going to have high acuity patients where you're not going to have high quality demographics. And that for EMS, that has to be the starting assumption.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mario. By the way, one of the hats I wore over the years, and I want to give a special thank you to Zoll, because one of the things I did was to run the interoperability showcase for HIMSS. Founded it with them some, 14 years ago or so, and then handed the baton off after 10 years. But Zoll, you were actually one of the only players at that time that really was engaged in a showcase event. Maybe it was you, I don't recall, but involved with a CDA type exchange between EMS and EDs. But I think that's important that we get down to get the elements right, so that is off the table. And that's something that can be done, right? We've seen so many different data mapping exercises over time. It's something that can be achieved, so that the only thing then to be dealt with is the organizational and legal issues, and the technical stuff the techies can take care of if they just sit around the table and figure out exactly what the data uses are. I like your reference to the challenge that you have of high acuity patients with, could be very sketchy demographic, which of course is going to wreak havoc inside the HIS systems. But it's good to keep that out in front of us. So thank you.
Yep, thanks.
This is Anne from Arizona. And I'm a state data manager, so I'm not on the technical side of the HIE. But something I just wanted to mention, I think it was the gentleman from Texas who mentioned the online portal lookup that EMTs and paramedics can do on the scene, which we have that in our state too, our state HIE. But we also have kind of a separate use that doesn't seem to be quite meeting the needs of our agencies yet. And that's where they can get outcome data back en masse so that they can run reports and do larger QA, QI. And then also as a state public health agency, so not just an individual patient lookup and a one-off match for a patient history, but to actually get that data back later on what happened to that patient after they cared for them, so they can do kind of a larger look at their protocols.
Thanks, Dan. Can you fill us in at all on kind of the contractual stuff that had to happen to make that first point of access happen with access to the HIE?
Sorry, Josh, were you talking? I couldn't hear the first part of your question. All I heard was access to the HIE.
Oh, can you fill us in on what had to take place to get the contractual side of things into place so that EMTs could access the HIE?
Sure. Well, our side of it's pretty easy because we had Health Current and they merged and now they're Contexture. I don't know if they're there. So they might actually be able to speak to the second part. But when an agency is interested in joining the HIE, because as I said, the EMS agencies themselves have to sign up. They don't just automatically get signed up. They contact Contexture or Health Current at the time and go through a recruitment onboarding process. All of the documents and agreements are signed with them. And then they allow the agencies to have access to the online portal where they can do individual lookups. We actually don't have access ourselves at the health department. We cannot use it for individual lookups. And then as a secondary part, when they sign up for this to be part of the HIE, their EPCR data is then sent from our state EPCR system to our state HIE. And then the idea would be for it to be matched within the HIE and the outcome data sent back, hopefully in consumable data points. There's a lot of, that sounds like a great, there's a lot of pain points along the way that we've discovered, but that's the basic process. But I was the one that put that comment in there too. I mean, the agencies, when this started, their big thing was they really were not comfortable with the idea of having their providers in the field have to ask patients to opt in before that data was sent. And then what happens if the patient later opts out? They're like, what do we do? Are we liable for that? So we don't have that many agencies using it. And I think they would all really like to, but it really would have to give them much more benefit than the amount of energy they would have to put into it and their concern for liability, et cetera, with thousands and thousands of, providers out there. I think your room might be on mute, Josh, because I can't hear you at all, but I can see your mouth there.
Let's see what's going on here.
Okay, there I can hear you a little bit better. You used to be louder.
For a little bit. Maybe it takes a while to recognize we're talking. The EMTs who are accessing the HIE, are they leaving their EPCR system and logging into a separate web portal at the HIE to get that information?
I believe so. Yeah, I think Contexture probably could speak to it more, but my understanding is it's a completely separate portal that they go into and look up patients. And it's not that they can't later. I think we have one agency that tries to take the time to individually look up patients later to see about outcome information, but really they don't have the time a lot of times to individually look up patients afterwards. Also, you have to have quite a staff to do that.
Kind of watching our audio. Okay, there we are.
Josh, we're having a hard time hearing you right now.
Yeah, it seems like the mic here in the room takes a few seconds before it decides to unmute us. I mean,
Okay.
to auto. I'm not sure what's happening there. Anyway, Mark has his hands up. Mark Branning.
Hi, guys. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
I've been involved with EMS ED. I was the program manager for what's called SAFER, where we did the interoperability in San Diego and then expansion to other counties in California. Just on the opt-in, opt-out in California, if you call 911 and the ambulance goes there, you have already given permission to access your records. So it's a pretty straightforward thing. That is all.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it sounds like that's the way to do it. Andrea.
Is that something that we can maybe get in some sort of like little piece of anything coming in something like TEFCA or anything coming in from like local or national policy when it comes to these kinds of things, because that seems like it might be it might have to be legislated because that's to the business.
Can ONC?
Yeah,
do something about that?
let me reflect something that I, in a totally different space, but similar. Patients were having all kinds of trouble getting access to their own data. And especially when the patient would say, just email it to me. The hospitals were saying, oh, yeah, I'm emailing you. And ONC wrote a very simple statement, came out of their legal department that said, if the patient says use email, that is authorizing you to use email. So I think based on the discussion we heard earlier, where they're saying, hey, you guys are in TEFCA. Okay, could you write a letter that explains you're included in TEFCA, these are the things that we need to have in that letter, so that you can then say, see, you know, St. Joe's, you know, there's the document that gives you release. It is based on legal opinion from ONC, it is based on these regulations. Quit asking us for clarification.
Exactly. And that's kind of what I was getting at earlier, John.
Yeah.
Where is ONC's head at in this? Now that we've identified that EMS kind of got skipped, and now we're circling back, we're putting some emphasis on this. What can ONC do to keep pushing this forward? And that's what I was asking about the agreement, but that's exactly what I was saying. Can they put out a statement that says something very specific that if we get any pushback at all, here's what it is. And by the way, if you could throw in treatment query and operations where you're required as part of that.
Yeah, I would recommend, because I was involved in the patient email thing, that you guys get together what you want this letter to look like. And give it to them and say, we would like you to publish something that looks very much like this. They will use their lawyers to figure out what of that can survive. So put the kitchen sink in there, you know, but you need to take the initiative. ONC isn't going to guess properly what they should say about this. They think they've said everything. You heard earlier, you know, oh yeah, you guys are in TEFCA. Okay, that's the first time I've ever heard, you know, them even saying that. And that's their signal to you that as far as they're concerned, they're done. And you're saying, no, wait a minute, we're still getting pain points. Here's the pain points.
Right. So let's take that as an action item coming out of here, but the next thing we talk about is what's the language in that letter, and get that to ONC.
Based on everything that you've heard today about how you ought to have access to that.
Absolutely.
All right, let's
Is this something that we can maybe a little marketing is talking about now is still Valentine's part that's the immediate police piece like Mark, you had the history of trying to be able to access, take our lessons learned from what you've done already to help the EMS systems kind of get that extra step forward that we have.
Rachel?
Yeah, I just wanted to respond to that comment from the gentleman and just say that I think too, the other thing that would be really important is for, you know, the EMS community to be actively engaged with the TEFCA development, right? So that's ongoing now through the recognized coordinating entity, the Sequoia project. And they have several committees that are working on, you know, standard operating procedures. And so I think it'll be invaluable to have you all at the table and to make sure that you're engaged and making sure that you're representing EMS, because that's where everything kind of comes together. I mean, ONC from a policy perspective, we can't like, you know, singularly like say that like, oh, this group needs to belong in TEFCA, because for us, it's everyone and anyone that's under that umbrella, right? If there is a use case that they're in and for TEFCA in regards to exchanging electronic health information, I think, you know, we would be supportive of it. But I think that what you all need to do as a community is to be really actively engaged and make sure that you are explicitly, you know, at the table and make sure your voice is being heard to be a part of that conversation.
I think that's really great advice, Rachel. My question would be is how can we figure out which of the particular committees we should participate in?
Which, I'm sorry, I missed the last part of your question or your comment, sorry.
Yeah, just like how can we figure out which committees we can participate in? Because I guarantee that some of the folks in this room would be more than happy to start sitting in on these. I certainly would.
Right. So I'll put in the chat, there's a list of SOPs that are currently being developed. Operations, I think, is the first, and individual access services. And then we're working on one for public health. And so if you all think that you would exchange data under any of these circumstances, that's where you get involved. Treatment is also being worked on. I think that that's the one that you all need to be involved in regards to that. Yep.
Awesome. Thank you, Richard.
Let's go to Dane from No2 and then Angela from Alaska. Dane?
I think to that last point, and for John and the others on the call, we sit one of our members sits on the steering committee for Carequality, and as a result participates in a lot of this as an advocate for EMS on a consistent basis. And the treatment query is open. We advocated for that probably 4 or 5 years ago, so EMS could do a treatment query without being a responder, which was an exception to some of the governance that was in place. And the next piece of this has to do with healthcare operations and payment queries. And a lot of that is currently restricted to EMS just based on the provider relationship that EMS has with the patient, that after transport's complete, treatment query is no longer allowed for EMS. So we've been advocating on that front for some time, but currently it's still locked up to a payment and operations query to get the billing and the outcomes information. And so again, there is representation on, at least for Carequality, and as part of the whole QHIN initiative that No2 is involved in, to be able to get that built into TEFCA also.
Thanks. Angela?
Hello, I'm so happy that I found you all. So yeah, I'm from Alaska. I don't work for the state. I work for a regional nonprofit that receives a lot of state grant funding to kind of help operationalize or support EMS operations in our region. And I've been attending the University of Michigan's HILS program. It's like to develop a learning health system. My goal is to develop a learning health system or systems in rural spaces focused around EMS and the integration of EMS and healthcare. So I'm just saying hi, and I look forward to learning more from you all. Your discussion is fascinating. Thank you.
Let's get ready to wrap up here. Give me just a second to share screen. Okay, so did we make any progress on today's questions? Federal regulation environment, the common agreements that are available from these networks, best options for actually getting an agreement in place and making some connections. I think we made a little bit of progress. I think I wrote down a whole list of homework for myself. Any other comments on kind of where we go next with making sure we get some answers to these questions? I think I've jotted down things like, how do we get the EMS industry involved in the TEFCA process so that we're kind of in at the ground level? How do we address when people don't want to share data? Is there something we can hand to them? Some things like that. Limitations in the type of queries that EMS might be permitted to do. That's something we need to dig into. Anything else that we need to kind of put on the to-do list? Yeah.
Well, I think, Eric Huffman mentioned that Jane Nakashima was looking forward to coming to a future meeting. We might be able to want to set that up for the next call. They also mentioned bringing their legal counsel. So we may want to also bring folks from the EMS side, the legal teams, like there was Ryan Stark, I think he presented at the last NEMSIS TAC, someone like that, so that the legal folks can maybe ask each other some questions too on that call.
Thank you.
Well, also, we have folks from the RCE right across the hall eating lunch, so we'll find out which are the best and most effective groups for folks to participate in as well.
Good. Yeah, and the other thing, Josh, was coming up with some language for ONC.
Yeah, great. I've got that written down. From those of you online, anything else you want to add in terms of our next steps that we need to work on?
John Donnelly, maybe just a relook at the data sets, just to make sure that we have anything needed there in motion.
Yeah, we do have that kind of on our, I guess you could say, agenda, right? As we work through these task force calls, we're going to get down to those data standards, data elements, some of that stuff. Yeah, coming up quite shortly. Was there someone else online who's going to make a comment?
This is Catherine. I would say that I heard throughout your community just now that you felt like hospitals didn't wish to exchange information with you. It might be a good idea to try to have some kind of stakeholder meeting to understand what their concerns are, and also include ONC so that we can help smooth out those wrinkles, because there's not a connecting of dots there, or what I'm hearing from you guys, and maybe just a stakeholder meeting between EMS and some hospital leaders, and to include ONC in the 21st Century's Cure or QHINs might easily get things straightened out immediately. And maybe the American Hospital Association could help you put it together. Because if you can start at the top that way, then you can help stop a little bit of this anxiety that's stopping people from sharing information. Just an idea.
Yeah, great suggestion. Thank you. All right, anyone else? We will wrap up here today with next steps. Just a reminder of the Google group that we have to keep everyone up to date on what we're doing. So if you haven't joined that group, go to Google Groups and look for the EMS Task Force. The GitHub repository, which we haven't put much in yet, but we're going to get to work on that.
Yeah, I'm hoping they put some stuff there for this week. So.
Great, yeah, and I've got some homework to do to start writing just kind of writing up some of the stuff we've been talking about these last couple of calls. So that's going to start showing up in that repository. The next task force topic next month, if we feel like we're ready to move on to it, we'll recap and see what we need to do. But if we're ready to, it's going to be to just get that broad survey of the healthcare information interoperability data standards that are out there. So when EMS does connect or their vendor connects, what standards are they going to be looking at predominantly over those connections? Also wanted to let you know that HIMSS Global Conference is coming up in April 17th through 21st. And in the interoperability showcase this year, we will have an EMS scenario. Scenario the right word? Vignette is what I was looking for. Yeah. the EMS involved vignette of a stroke patient being seen by EMS and then taken to a hospital. Image Trend is the EMS vendor that will be involved in that particular vignette, along with a vendor from the hospital side to show the transfer of information between EMS and the hospital. So that'll be going on at the HIMSS Interoperability Showcase.
And also in the interoperability showcase, we'll have our IHE USA booth/pavilion, where we'll be focusing on our initiatives, chief among which are our work with NEMSIS. So there'll be an opportunity to sit down in the IG USA booth and talk to the team there. And folks from NEMSIS will be around all week as well.
Thank you. So let's keep this conversation going as we prepare for our next task force call next month. Really appreciate the participation today. Also, thank you, those of you online, for your patience while we waited to get lunch at the table and everything to get set up here. We appreciate you hanging out for a few minutes to wait for us. But I hope it was valuable for you to have the people in this room who were able to contribute. Thanks again to Rachel from ONC for your contributions today as well. So we'll go ahead and call it a day and let you get on with your next things. Thank you, everyone.